The tariffs that went into effect this week are 25% tariffs on most Canadian imports. There's a slightly lower rate for energy and all Mexican imports. I think the biggest thing that people need to look out for in the state of Utah is that a lot of our supply chain in the US, Mexico, and Canada is completely intertwined. So domestic manufacturers are moving parts of the production process across the border all the time, quite regularly and by design in the process, which means, for example, when a car is produced, it can cross the border sometimes 7 and 8 times going through the production process. And the reason why these kinds of tariffs are so devastating is that they start to layer on. And so there have already been predictions about car prices spiking. Produce that we import regularly will spike quite quickly. There are a lot of reports out there that you could see price increases in produce as early as next week. And everything in between there. Cars will probably take a little bit longer. It just depends on how long it takes to get the new cars on the lot that are going through the production process.
How does this impact the other countries as you see it from what they get from the United States?
So the other countries, their producers are going to face lower demand because their products are more expensive. That's the whole point of tariffs in some sense. And so it will hurt Mexican and Canadian producers. I think what gets missed in this conversation is, again, how much it hurts American producers because the supply chain is so mixed up across all of the borders.
How does this impact not just the consumer, but maybe businesses here in Utah that rely on that back and forth that you alluded to, sending things back and forth
Yep.
numerous times?
Yep. Utah businesses are going to face more expensive input costs. And quite plainly, we've seen this many times in the past. What they tend to do is pass those cost increases on to consumers. So that's going to make their products more expensive, which is going to hurt Utah businesses with lower demand and Utah consumers facing higher prices.
How drastic is the number in these tariffs? How big is this?
It's devastating. 25% is an enormous tariff on our largest trading partners.
Have you ever seen anything quite like to this magnitude?
No, I think this is part of the suite of things that President Trump has said he was going to do when he came into the office. And so he was promising much higher tariffs on China. China has faced higher tariffs in the past, but for Canada and Mexico, I think this is a devastating rate that they've implemented.
Is there any way to withstand this long term?
I think that prices are going to skyrocket. And when prices skyrocket, I hope that the president takes that into consideration when he's trying to adjust his trade policy accordingly.
So it sounds like, putting this as a blanket sort of statement over these tariffs, this hurts everybody, right?
Yes. Yes. This hurts everybody, and it hurts the lowest income Americans the most. We know that as well. They rely a lot on these imported goods.
Anything else on Utah industry specific that you've been looking at as part of these tariffs?
Yeah, what I'll say is for Utah industries, Canada and Mexico have announced retaliatory tariffs, as has China, and they're amongst Utah's largest trading partners in terms of export. So that's going to hurt export demand, just like it's hurting businesses that are facing higher input costs.
Is there a way to go around a tariff? Like, is there a way to skirt any of these extreme hikes in some way for businesses, exemptions or anything?
Businesses are definitely lobbying for exemptions. This is all very new and fast moving. So the only exemption we've heard is a lower tariff for Canadian energy that's being imported. In the past, when there have been tariffs on Chinese imports, Chinese manufacturers have managed to route their products through other countries to avoid tariffs, which again, if you're trying to protect American businesses, that basically undoes the tariff. So we'll see if that happens here. I think that will be much harder because we have a free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada that has linked up our supply chains. That makes it very hard to route around them.
Is there a country you think hurts most in all of this?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I think everybody is hurt, like in pretty dramatic ways.
What's the best case scenario that can come from this? Would it be just stopping things immediately?
Yep, this has been in the past a negotiation tactic for the administration that's been quite successful. We're already hearing the Secretary of Commerce walking things back a little bit, saying that there might be relief as early as tomorrow. And so I think it's anybody's guess how quickly that will come, but I can't imagine that this is a permanent state of the world, given how devastating it is for the economy.
I was reading a number today that goods from China, Mexico, and Canada accounted for more than 40% of imports from the
Correct.
United States last year. Do you see that
Correct.
number similar?
Yep, I think that that's a similar number. And again, I think everybody should remember that a lot of that is domestic manufacturers that are importing inputs into production.
Anything else you think is important for people to know about this topic? It seems to be tariffs are not new, but this is a startling type of tariff that has been implemented and really could affect the world at this point.
Yeah, I think that all I would do is hope that everybody could exercise a little bit of patience. Again, giving the potential for this to dramatically upset the economy, I have to imagine that we will come to some sort of agreement with Mexico and Canada so that we can take these off, scale them back to come to something more reasonable because we're just not in a reasonable place right now.
Last thing for you, just on something you mentioned, this could really impact lower income families, right? Is that
That's right.
purely on shopping for food and goods and stuff
Shopping
like
for
that?
food, just the share of their income that they tend to spend on basic necessities. And a lot of those include imported produce, imported products. Those are lower cost products. And so we know that lower income families are the hardest hit by tariffs.